divisions, 3,455 cubic inch monsters, one legendary year that changed American muscle forever. But which one would absolutely destroy the others in a heads-up battle? Gentlemen, buckle up, because today we're settling the most heated garage argument of the past 50 years. I'm talking about 1970, the absolute peak of American muscle, when General Motors unleashed not one, not two, but three different 455 big block beasts that would make today's supercars weep. We've got the Oldsmobile 442 with its legendary Rocket 455 that could melt asphalt. The Pontiac GTO Judge, yeah, that Judge, packing a 455 HO that redefined street credibility. And the dark horse nobody saw coming, the Buick GSX Stage 1 that Motor Trend called the quickest American production car of its time. But here's where it gets controversial, fellas. The official numbers? They're all lies. Every single manufacturer was sandbagging their real power figures, and I'm about to expose exactly how much horsepower these beasts really made. Plus, I'll reveal which one of these is so rare that finding one today is like striking oil in your backyard. Stick around, because this is going to get interesting. Before we dive into these mechanical masterpieces, let's paint the picture of 1970 America. Nixon's in the White House. We just had to abort Apollo 13. Vietnam protests are raging in the streets, and the Beatles just called it quits. But you know what? None of that mattered when you were sitting behind the wheel of one of these 455-powered rockets. This was the year American automakers said screw fuel economy, screw emissions, screw everything. Let's build the most powerful street machines the world has ever seen. And General Motors? They went absolutely nuclear. See, GM had this brilliant strategy: let their divisions compete against each other. Oldsmobile, Pontiac, and Buick were basically told, go build the baddest 455 you can. The result? Three completely different approaches to the same displacement that would define muscle car legend forever. But here's what most people don't know. These weren't just different tunes of the same engine. Oh no, gentlemen. These were three completely different animals, each with their own personality, their own strengths, and their own secrets. Let's start with the granddaddy of GM muscle, the Oldsmobile 442. Now, if you're wondering what 442 means, it's not the cubic inches like some people think. It stands for 4-barrel carb, 4-speed transmission, and dual exhausts. But in 1970, they strapped their legendary Rocket 455 under that hood, and brother, this thing was serious business. The standard Rocket 455 pumped out 365 horsepower and a tire-shredding 500 pound-feet of torque. But that was just the warm-up act. The real show was the W30 package, and this is where Oldsmobile showed they meant business. The W30 bumped power to 370 horses, but the real magic was in the details. We're talking a hotter camshaft, better flowing heads, and here's the kicker: a lightweight aluminum intake manifold that you could only get with the W30. Plus, those dual hood scoops weren't just for show. They fed cold air directly to that hungry quadrajet 4-barrel. And the sound? Holy smokes, gentlemen. That Rocket 455 had a rumble that could wake the dead and a bark that meant business. On the drag strip, a properly set up W3442 would run sub-15-second quarter miles at over 100 miles per hour. In 1970, that was rocket ship territory. Now, if the 442 was the sophisticated muscle car, the Pontiac GTO Judge was the street fighter with an attitude problem. And here's something that'll blow your mind. Technically, the Pontiac 455 isn't even a big block. That's right, fellas. While Olds and Buick had separate small and big block families, Pontiac used the same block size across their entire V8 lineup. Genius engineering or just Pontiac being different? You decide. The 455 HO, that's high output for you youngsters, cranked out 360 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque. But Pontiac's approach was different. Where other manufacturers focused on top-end power, Pontiac built this engine for pure, unadulterated low-end grunt. The Judge package? Man, that was pure theater. We're talking wild graphics, that iconic rear spoiler, and ram air for induction that was standard equipment. Those functional hood scoops weren't messing around. They were feeding that beast cold, dense air for maximum power. But here's where it gets interesting and expensive. A real judge with the 455 and 4-speed manual? Rarer than hen's teeth, gentlemen. Most people don't realize how few of these were actually built, which makes finding one today like winning the lottery. Now here's where things get really interesting, gentlemen. While everyone was arguing about Chevy versus Ford, Buick, yeah, your grandfather's luxury car company, quietly built what might have been the most devastating muscle car of 1970. The Buick GSX Stage 1. Motor Trend called it the quickest American production car of the year. 0 to 60 in just over 6 seconds, quarter mile in the 13s, and get this, 510 pound-feet of torque. That's more twist than anything else rolling off a production line in 1970. But here's the dirty little secret. Buick was lying about the horsepower. They claimed 360, same as the Pontiac, but dyno tests suggest this thing was making closer to 400 real horsepower. Why the deception? Insurance companies, gentlemen. The higher the official rating, the higher your premiums. The Stage 1 engine was a masterpiece of engineering. While Olds and Pontiac achieved their displacement through longer strokes, Buick bored out the cylinders, creating a lighter, more rev-happy engine with thin-wall casting technology that was years ahead of its time. And the rarity? Hold on to your hats. Only 678 GSX models were built in 1970. Of those, just 178 were painted in Apollo white. The rest? That legendary Saturn yellow that screamed, "Catch me if you can," from 3 blocks away. All right, gearheads, let's get into the nitty-gritty of what made each of these 455s tick, because the devil's in the details. The Oldsmobile Rocket 455 was all about proven reliability with serious performance. That aluminum intake manifold on the W30 wasn't just weight savings. It dissipated heat better than iron, keeping that air charge cooler and denser. The Quadra-Jet carburetor was perfectly matched to the engine's breathing characteristics. Pontiac's 455 HO took a different approach. Those free-flowing cast-iron headers were designed specifically for exhaust scavenging, basically sucking the spent gases out faster so fresh air could get in quicker. The 10.25 to 1 compression ratio was the sweet spot between power and pump gas compatibility. But Buick, they went full mad scientist. That Stage 1 camshaft was specially ground for maximum torque production. The Rochester Quadra-Jet was calibrated differently than the Olds version. And those reinforced valve springs and connecting rods, they knew this engine was going to see some serious RPMs. Here's something most people miss. The Stage 2 package. This was a dealer-installed option that was so rare, most people don't even know it existed. We're talking forged pistons, higher compression, improved headers, and an even more aggressive cam. Power estimates? Try 500 horsepower, gentlemen. Now let's talk about what these beasts could really do when the rubber met the road, because the magazine tests from 1970 tell a fascinating story. Car and Driver got their hands on a W3442 and ran a 13.9 quarter mile at 101 miles per hour. Not bad for a car that weighed over 3,600 pounds. But here's the thing, that was with street tires and a stock exhaust system. Imagine what it could do with some sticky rubber and open headers. The GTO Judge, Hot Rod Magazine managed a 14.1 at 100 miles per hour, but they noted that the engine felt like it had more to give. Remember, Pontiac tuned this thing for low-end torque, not peak horsepower numbers. It was a street fighter, not a drag strip queen. But the Buick GSX? This is where it gets interesting. Motor Trend's test car ran 13.38 at 105 miles per hour, the quickest of the bunch. But get this, multiple testers noted that the car felt significantly more powerful than the official 360 horsepower rating suggested. Here's what the magazines couldn't test, the intimidation factor. Picture this. You're sitting at a red light in your Camaro SS, feeling pretty good about yourself, when one of these 455-powered monsters pulls up next to you. That deep, rumbling idle that shakes the ground. That's psychological warfare, gentlemen. These weren't just cars, fellas. They were cultural statements. In 1970, what you drove said everything about who you were. The 442 owner? He was the guy who appreciated engineering excellence. This was a thinking man's muscle car, sophisticated, refined, but absolutely brutal when you mash the throttle. It was the choice of the successful businessman who wanted to relive his youth on the weekend. The GTO Judge owner? Pure rebel. This was the car of choice for the guy who wanted everyone to know he didn't play by the rules. Those wild graphics, that aggressive stance, it was automotive attitude with a capital A. But the GSX? That was the ultimate sleeper mentality. Here's a car that looked like it belonged in a country club parking lot, but could embarrass anything on the street. It was the choice of the guy who let his driving do the talking. And the sound? Each one had its own voice. The 442's Rocket 455 had that deep, authoritative rumble. The Judge's 455 HO had a more aggressive bark. But the GSX? That stage one had a sophisticated growl that hinted at the violence lurking beneath that refined exterior. Gentlemen, 1970 wasn't just a great year for muscle cars. It was the last great year. And here's why everything changed almost overnight. The Clean Air Act was coming. Insurance companies were getting wise to these horsepower wars and jacking up premiums through the roof. A young guy trying to insure a 455-powered muscle car? Good luck affording the payments and the insurance. By 1972, compression ratios had dropped from the 10-to-1 range down to 8.5-to-1 or lower. The SAE changed how horsepower was measured, switching from gross to net ratings. Suddenly, that 370 horsepower W30 was officially rated at 270 net horsepower. But it wasn't just the regulations, it was the times. The oil crisis was coming. Environmental consciousness was rising. The era of bigger is better was ending, and with it, the golden age of American muscle. These 345s represent the absolute pinnacle of that era. The last hurrah before everything changed forever. They were built when engineers were told, make it as powerful as possible, instead of make it as efficient as possible. And that's what makes them so special today. They're not just cars, they're time capsules from an era when American automotive engineers were given unlimited budgets and told to build the most powerful street machines imaginable. Now let's talk money, because if you're thinking about adding one of these legends to your garage, you better be sitting down for this conversation. A numbers matching W3442? We're talking six figures easy, and that's for a decent driver. A concourse quality example? Sky's the limit. But here's the thing. They're still undervalued compared to their Chevelle SS counterparts. The GTO Judge with the 455? Forget about it. A real Judge with the 455 HO and 4-speed manual is approaching $250,000 territory for a pristine example. And finding one? Good luck. Most of the survivors are locked away in serious collections. But the GSX? This is where it gets absolutely insane. Remember, only 678 were built. A Stage 1 GSX in Apollo White? We've seen them crack $300,000 at auction. The Saturn yellow cars are slightly more common, but still command serious money. Here's what's driving these values. Authenticity is everything. The number of fake 442 W30s, Judge GTOs, and GSX Stage 1s out there is staggering. Documentation, matching numbers, and provenance are worth their weight in gold. And here's a prediction from this old gearhead. These values are only going up. The guys who lusted after these cars in high school are now in their peak earning years, and they're willing to pay whatever it takes to own their dream machine. All right, gentlemen, it's time for the moment of truth. After diving deep into the specs, the performance, the rarity, and the legacy, which of these 455 monsters truly reigns supreme? If you want the most well-rounded package, proven reliability, strong performance, and reasonable availability, the Oldsmobile 442 W30 is your answer. It's the Swiss Army knife of muscle cars. Sophisticated enough for daily driving, brutal enough for weekend warrior duty. If you want the most iconic, the most recognizable, the car that screams American muscle from 3 blocks away, the GTO Judge is the only choice. It's automotive theater at its finest. And that 455 HO has the grunt to back up the attitude. But if you want the ultimate sleeper, the car that can embarrass supercars while looking like a gentleman's express, the Buick GSX Stage 1 is in a class by itself. It's the thinking man's muscle car, and that 510 pound-feet of torque is still impressive by today's standards. Here's my take after 40 years of wrenching on these beasts. There is no wrong choice. Each one represents a different philosophy, a different approach to the same goal: maximum American muscle. The real winner? Us enthusiasts who get to appreciate these mechanical masterpieces more than 50 years later. They represent a time when American automakers weren't afraid to build cars that could literally kill you if you weren't careful. Now, you might be wondering, what do these 50-year-old muscle cars have to do with today's automotive landscape? More than you might think, gentlemen. Every modern muscle car, your Hellcat Challengers, your ZL1 Camaros, your Shelby GT 500s, they're all chasing the same dream these 1974 55s achieved: maximum power, maximum attitude, maximum American muscle. But here's what's different. Today's cars are faster, more efficient, more reliable, and infinitely safer. A stock Hellcat will destroy any of these 455s in a straight line. But does it have the soul? Does it have the character? That's debatable. These 1970 45s were built in an era when safety was optional, fuel economy was irrelevant, and emissions were someone else's problem. They were pure, unadulterated automotive ID, the mechanical expression of American excess. And that's exactly why they matter today. In our world of computer-controlled everything, these cars represent a time when horsepower was king, when bigger was always better, and when the solution to any problem was more cubic inches. The guys keeping these legends alive, the restorers, the collectors, the weekend warriors, they're preserving more than just cars. They're preserving a piece of American automotive DNA that we'll never see again. So there you have it, gentlemen. The ultimate showdown between three of the greatest engines ever built: the Oldsmobile Rocket 455, the Pontiac 455 HO, and the Buick Stage 1455. Three different approaches to the same goal, three legendary power plants that defined an era. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these 455 monsters would you choose for your dream garage? Are you Team Oldsmobile with that sophisticated Rocket 455? Team Pontiac with the street-fighting Judge? Or Team Buick with that sleeper GSX Stage 1? Drop your choice in the comments below and tell me why. Better yet, if you've been lucky enough to drive or own one of these legends, share your story. The community wants to hear about your experience with these mechanical masterpieces. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into muscle car history, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We've got more legendary engine battles coming up, including the big block Chevy showdown you've been requesting. Remember, gentlemen, they don't make them like this anymore, and they never will again. These 1970 45s represent the absolute pinnacle of American automotive excess, and we're lucky to have witnessed their legacy. Until next time, keep the rubber side down and the shiny side up. This has been your host, and we'll see you in the next one.